Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the jungle. I'm your host, Hamilton Winters, strategist with Liger Partners. I really couldn't be more excited to be in the studio today with my friend Sidney Aulds. Sidney, how you doing today?
Good morning, Hamilton. How's it going, man?
It's great. We're back in the studio. It's my favorite place.
It feels great to be here.
Thank you for joining us here in the studio. It's been, I guess, a couple of weeks since we were supposed to be in here, and some things kind of fell apart. But I'm glad because I'm a firm believer that timing always works out perfectly. So there was a reason for us both to be in the studio this morning. What I want to do is give you the opportunity to introduce yourself because you know yourself better than anybody else.
Yeah.
So just go ahead and introduce yourself. Give us a little bit of background on who you are, what you do, and how you even really got in this room today.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name's Sidney Aulds. I am the lead design executioner at Creature Builds, based in Birmingham, Alabama. And I am born and raised in Louisiana, and Hamilton and I go back to, I think we were trying to figure this out last night, 2009, 2010. Hamilton worked for my father and just was always an outstanding worker and always stood above the crowd. And so I'm just glad to be here with you today, man, and have followed your journey and have been watching over the years via social media, what little social media you have left. But yeah. So anyways, it's been great to be reconnected with you. So anyways, we're both from West Monroe, Louisiana, and my journey has taken me from Louisiana to Colorado to San Diego, California, back to Denver, and then now Birmingham, Alabama. And so I am a licensed architect as of recent, and am working on really growing and building with a new company. So I'm on a new phase of my journey, and so I'm excited to share a little bit about that. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, we had dinner last night, which was awesome. I don't usually get to do that. I would say for the majority of folks that I interview on a Thursday morning, that is the first time I'm ever meeting them.
Yeah.
And so obviously it's not the same situation with you. But as we sat at Gypsy Kitchen last night and had a few tapas, we talked about your story and my story and kind of how they've run parallel to one another, but we never were really close friends. You're a little bit older than I am, but following along on that path, hearing you're bouncing around from Louisiana to, where'd you go first?
Colorado. I was in Denver, yep.
San Diego, back to Colorado, back to Birmingham. Yeah. It seems like a pretty normal thing to go straight from Louisiana to Birmingham, but your path took you all over the place. And I think it's so interesting. Give us a little bit more detail on what you were doing that led you to move your chess piece from place to place, and how you ended up where you ended up.
Yeah, so I went to architecture school at Louisiana Tech there in Russin. Chose Louisiana Tech over LSU. Wanted to stay home. I wanted to be closer to the family, and then also the architecture program, which was by and large better there. Yeah, it was a great design school there. But I knew that as I was going through school, that Louisiana wasn't my final destination. For some reason, I always had bigger dreams and bigger aspirations. And I wanted, maybe not bigger, but I just wanted to try something new. I wanted to get out, other aspirations. And so I started identifying schools, and I knew that I loved hands-on work. I knew I wanted to be in a design build program, something I didn't get to do at Louisiana Tech. And so I identified a couple of different schools across the country that had great design build programs. And so what I did is I just set my sights on that. And so one of the things I was telling you last night is part of my journey and part of the story that I want to share today is really it's not about where you start, but it's about where you finish. And so what happened when I went to architecture school, I can't tell you that I was a good designer. I can't tell you that I was talented in any of the skills that are required to be in architecture. And so I got to the end of my undergraduate career at Louisiana Tech, and I knew that I wanted to go somewhere else, and I had my sights set on Denver, and I applied. I made a mistake, and I only applied to one school for grad school, and so they'll tell you that's a mistake first off. But I didn't have any skills. I put together a really poor application, and I did not get accepted into the program, and so it was pretty disappointing, right? But what I did is, I finished undergrad. I could have taken the easy route. I could have stayed at the school. I could have just, filtered right into the graduate school where I was. But what I did is I went and I took a full-time job. I was working at a local architecture firm for one of my favorite architects there locally, and through that time I had met a mentor in my senior year there named Harold Linton, and Harold was the author of Portfolio Design, and I spent a year working very closely with Harold, and so on my portfolio, all my skills, on my presentation, everything I needed to do to get into grad school. and we would meet. I mean, I remember we would meet on like Friday nights. I would send him my work, and we would be on the phone. I would be in my bedroom with the door locked and a blanket over the door while the roommate and the friends were partying in the living room. So I was focused on getting to Colorado, and so it took me a full extra year to get there. But the second year that I applied, I got accepted. So I moved to Denver. It was a 2-year master's program where we focused. I got a certificate in design build, and so that 2 years was a hands-on build what you design. And so that was kind of what I always wanted to do. Had a great time doing it, and I'm in my last semester in Denver. And I had a part-time architecture job. I'm sitting at the office, and I've got my desktop in front of me, and I've got my laptop on the side, and I'm listening to one of my other favorite architects, Jonathan Siegel, and he says something about the program. That's when we started the program at Woodbury University. And so I stopped what I was doing. I rewound it, and I played it again. He said, "There's got the Woodbury University." So I Googled Jonathan Siegel Woodbury University, and I found out there was a real estate development program in San Diego, California. Yeah. I looked at the deadline. I said, "I've got 11 days to do this." And so what I did is I shut down the computer. I went home and I immediately pulled all the files off my hard drive from grad school application 2 years prior, and I just started updating them. And I sat up late that night, started updating them. I actually had 2 professors at Colorado tell me that I didn't give them enough time to write a letter of or a reference letter for me. So I mean, even I was working on it. So I was calling everybody I could just to get that letter, and then ended up getting accepted to the program in San Diego, and just packed up and moved out to San Diego. It was a quick turnaround. I mean, it was maybe like 3 or 4 months from the time that I knew that I was going to the time I was moving, and so it was a really quick turnaround. So I was chasing the dream is really what I was doing, and I wasn't locked down to any place, and so I was able to pack up pretty quickly and get out to San Diego. I spent a year to the day in San Diego, had an excellent time, and what that program was about was learning to be the architect, the contractor, and the developer. And so part of, I think, even you guys use the tagline, building cities. Yep. And so that's one of my things that I always say, if I wasn't getting paid, and if I could go, rewind 1,000 years, and we're, on the Oregon Trail, or prior to the Oregon Trail, we're natives and we've got a tribe, what would I be doing? Yeah. I would want to build the community. Yep. I'm building the city. Yeah. So anyways, so that's one of the things that I'm just passionate about, building cities. And so my education, I like to say, I learned how to become a designer in undergrad school. I learned how to build in my first grad school, and then the second grad school I learned about development. So I think I've got a very well-balanced education. And Hamilton, we talked a little bit about this last night, but I never thought that I always feel like I'm behind. I think that's just something that people that are driven feel like. They just want to be further ahead. They want to be further ahead. And I still feel like that in a lot of ways. I recognize I am pretty young still, but I never thought that I would spend till I was 27 years old in college. Yeah. And so, I've been out for a little over 3 years now. So anyways, but things
Mad
are
respect.
Yeah, it was a tough journey.
but it's a rewarding journey. We were talking about last night. Nobody cares about the story that it was all just a straight path and everything worked out, right? Everything went to plan. I did an interview for a book yesterday. We talked about it a little bit last night. And the guy asked me, name something that hasn't gone to plan in your life. And I said, an easier question would be name something that has gone to plan in my life. Yep. Right? Everything hasn't gone to plan, but it's made the story that much more beautiful, right? Yep. And we're able to sit here, and you just expounded for 5 minutes about your story that looked like a zigzag line, and when you look back, it was really more of a straight path than you probably even thought. You told me a story which will stick with me for a while, and it was about the spring break week that all of the students were gone, all of your classmates were gone, and you were in the classroom essentially studying and doing a project. And without me telling the story for you, give them, the audience, a little insight on the story. Because I thought that was the coolest thing ever. But it's kind of why we're sitting here today, is because that's the type of person that you are. Yeah.
I think I made some, I don't know, if maybe some enemies from that story, but so we're in the middle of getting ready to build these cabins that we built 14 cabins in Leadville, Colorado, and I'm sitting there, and it was the Friday that we started spring break, and everybody had left the studio, and everybody was gone, and I was still in the studio working, and I forget exactly what I was working on, and all of a sudden these two people start coming in, and we had built a mock-up of this cabin that we were working on, and so that it was on display. Everybody from the school was coming in to look at it, and all the different partners that we had on the project were coming in, and these people were coming in. They were shooting the place or shooting pictures of the cabin, and they started, I started talking to them, and then they were like, "Oh, can we interview you? We're with the school marketing team. Can we interview you for an article?" And then a few, it was probably 2 or 3 weeks later, I see the article, and it was just titled, "We've Got Work to Do." And so they talk about how I was in the studio when everybody had already checked out for spring break, and I was still in the studio working. And so part of the message of it doesn't matter where you start, but where you finish is show up.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've had to do. I wasn't born insane, with insane skills. I went to school with people that are far more talented than I am. I can't even tell you how much more talented that people were, but I was always there. And so, and if you're plugged in, if you're trying, if you show up, it's crazy what happens. But yeah, so that was a cool story.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to, and you mentioned the different stages of your education teaching you different things. And I think you missed a step, because your dad, who we both worked for, taught you the value of hard work.
Yeah, he taught me the value of hard work.
And that seems to be kind of an overarching theme of your story. And I remember spending Saturdays up there, and we had work to do. And, if there's nothing else to do, just start cleaning up. Make the place better than you found it when you walked in that morning, so that you can have confidence leaving in the afternoon when you lock up shop. But and I haven't seen him in a while. Please tell him I appreciate him teaching me that as well. But that seems to be a mantra of yours, which is really powerful. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing in Birmingham, a little bit about Creature Builds, and kind of that opportunity, because it sounds really exciting. You just kind of have stepped into this role, but you've also stepped out on a limb to take it. So give us a little bit of insight into that.
Yeah, so I moved back to Denver the day after I finished school in San Diego. Started a company with a longtime friend and business partner, and we were doing what we could to get our own development off the ground, and then we were doing client work on the side. He chose to step away from the company, went back to where he was at, and then I just continued. I called, it was a client and a guy that was really becoming a mentor to me, and he said, "Sidney, if I can give you one advice, don't quit." And he said, "Just stick to it." I was telling him about my business partner leaving, and he said, "Just stick with it." And so this guy ended up hiring me to do a lot of work. I wasn't a licensed architect at the time, so the most I could do was what we call schematic design, really. And so I was doing a lot of his concept and schematic design work. And he had connections. His business partner was best friends with the architect that I moved to San Diego. So I'd been in and around properties that he had owned in San Diego before I ever met him. So we had some ties, and I met him. And I have to share this story because I think it just goes back to if you're willing to just hard work, man. That's the only way I know to put it is. So we were trying to raise money for this development, and I met this particular. This all ties into how I'm in Birmingham, actually, and it will be in a book one day. But I'm driving for Lyft and Uber, just trying to pay rent while we're raising money to build a real estate development project. And so we had this project. We had been through two rounds at the city zoning, had gotten approvals from the zoning department. We had the property under contract, and we were just looking for equity. And so what I had a binder, a little project binder, and I just stuck it in the seat. And so I was driving for Lyft and Uber. I specifically bought a Lincoln so that I could get it wasn't black, but I got the Uber business class.
Okay,
so
nice.
I drove a lot of people to and from the airport in Denver, and so I did that intentionally so that I could talk to people about business, right? And so I knew that I could, if I got the Uber Select, that I would talk to a lot of business people. So I did that, and I'm, selling the project to anybody and everybody that would listen, right? And so made a ton of contacts. I mean, I probably have over 100 business cards from the few months that I drove Lyft and Uber.
Wow.
Anyways, I pick up this guy who becomes my client in Denver, and he was taking his family out to dinner. And I start sharing the story. Yeah, just moved from San Diego, we're raising money. And he goes, "Hey, here's my business card, call me." And so of course I followed up with him, and he probably didn't think I would ever follow up with him, and I did. And so went to meeting for lunch, and 3 hours went by. We never left his office. We never even made it to lunch. And we sat there and talked for 3 hours in this guy's office. And so one thing led to another. I started doing all of his work, a lot of his design work down in South Colorado. He bought 5 properties in Birmingham, Alabama. And he said, hey, I need some help on these projects. And so I was doing a lot of concept work for him, and then went through some iterations on some schematic designs on a project that we'll probably talk about here in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But and then so I did that, and then he had to find an architect and contractor. And so I was in a lot of meetings sorting through contractors, architects there in Birmingham. And Creature was a company that some of his local development friends had hired for their projects. Mm-hmm. If you go to Birmingham, you can't go through Birmingham without seeing a Creature logo on under construction.
Yeah.
And so the company is highly visible in the community, and everybody. It's almost like it's this thing, because when you read Creature, it stands out, right? Yeah, so, anyways,
great brand.
It's a great brand. So, anyways, I'm traveling to Birmingham with him, getting these projects off the ground, and I remember sitting in Creature's what we call schematic design 1 presentation, and they started with, hey, this is what we were given, and it was my work. And so it was just a cool thing to see that. And so then there were some other projects, some other design work that I ended up passing off to Creature as well. Mm-hmm. And then sometime last December, I wake up to an email from the CEO, Mike Gibson, and he says, hey, I want to talk to you about being the director of architecture at Creature. And so it's funny, like I told you, my first initial reaction was like, man, I appreciate it, but like I've got my own thing. But anyways, I didn't send that response, thankfully, and talked to the family about it. Went through some rigorous conversations with the company, and anyway, so now we are finishing one of the projects there in Birmingham that I started working on in Denver. Yeah. And now it's cool to see that, and so now we are. But what I love about Creature, and one of the things that made me pack up my wonderful life in Colorado and move to Birmingham, was the company's search for a better way. And so what Creature is about is what we call design, manufacture, construct. And we are looking to basically shake up the industry in architecture and construction. Rather than the architect and the contractor being pitted against one another from contractual standpoints, we're a true design, manufacture, construction business model, where we are the architect, we are the contractor. We manufacture as much as we can out of our own shop and with our own craftsmen. Yeah. And we're working on 2 of our own developments. And so a lot of the stuff that I went to school for, everything I want to do with my career and what I want to leave a legacy doing, Creature is working on. Mm-hmm. Young company, 2 years old. It was a merger that rebranded, and it's got great leadership. And so, but what I really like the most is looking for a better way. And so there's a lot of cool things about the company that just set us apart in the industry. And I think that just the amount of growth that we're going to experience over the next, for a long time, but especially the next 2 to 4 years is going to be pretty remarkable.
It's huge. I know there's a lot of growth in Birmingham right now. It seems like a mini version of Atlanta. A lot of people that move there from Atlanta or move to Atlanta from Birmingham see the similarities. It's obviously a smaller version, but at the same time, it seems like it's an up-and-coming kind of younger vibe.
Birmingham's great, man. I was actually very surprised that Birmingham is as beautiful as it is. You hear the South, you're in Colorado, it's the mountains, and you're like, okay, I'm going back to the South. And then but you get to Birmingham, and it's not just flat. Yeah. Where we're from is flat.
Yeah, it is.
There is no topography. There's nothing exciting to look at. You get a river, but that's it. Yep. You get to Birmingham, there's houses on the side of hills that, we're actually building one right now that's on the side of a hill. But there's houses that overlook the city. And so there's a lot of topography in North Alabama. And so that's been great. And then, Birmingham is also one of the cities Birmingham was a leading number 2 steel producing city behind Pittsburgh. Yep. And so in the early 1900s, there's actually a corner of Birmingham downtown that's called the heaviest corner on earth. And it's called that because it was one of the biggest cities, and they had the tallest buildings that anybody knew of in the entire South. And so there's a great infrastructure of old buildings. It was a very big city at the time. Yeah. And what happened is, with a lot of cities, whenever people started going to the suburbs and pushing out of cities, Birmingham was one of those as well. Yeah. And then the 2008 crash didn't help the city at all. Mm-hmm. But the city is definitely rebounding. And, another thing is sometimes it's okay to hit rock bottom, and I think the city did for a while. The city was a great, powerful city.
Yeah.
It got very it went to I guess a very low point in its history, and then now I would say it's rebounding, and it's got the potential to be a top city, a great city in America.
Yeah. I'm excited for you to be there. Excited for you to be this close. And I know, you
Yeah.
love Denver, you love San Diego. It's hard not to love. With that being said, you didn't let the situation not being ideal in location keep you from at least chasing what that ideal work situation or development opportunity was. And you chased it, right? And like you said, you could have sent that email saying, no, I'm good where I am. But would that have gotten you to where you are? And who knows where it'll take you from here on. But like we talked about last night, who are we to put labels of good and bad on something?
Yep.
Your best day could be you winning the lottery, but it could end up being the reason why you go bankrupt. So was it the best thing to ever happen to you, or was it the worst? Walk into an opportunity without putting a label on it and say, hey, look, this could be, in the past, previous Hamilton or previous Sidney would have said this was the worst day in the world. Who knows? I have the hope that this is a catalyst for the best thing to ever happen to me. And it seems like you're a believer in that as well.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you joining me on the show. How can these folks get in touch with you, get a view of your projects, get excited about what you guys are working on? Because I know I am, and I know they will be too.
Yeah, so you can reach me on Instagram at Sidney Aulds, SIDNEYAULDS. So that'll be the easiest place. I'm also on LinkedIn, pretty active there as well. So we've talked about the social media thing. I don't have Facebook. I don't have Snapchat. I don't have any. But yeah, you can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, I sure do appreciate it, man.
Yeah, this is great, man.
This was even better than I expected it to be.
Thanks for having me over.
Absolutely. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your time this morning. And I know they appreciate it as well.
Yeah, man.
It's a lot of insight.
It's great to see what you're doing over here in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's a good place. You'll have to come back and visit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Thanks,
for everybody
Hamilton.
watching in, I hope you've enjoyed this morning with Sidney Aulds here in the jungle. I know I sure have. We'll catch you next time. Everybody, you guys have a great day and be good. See ya.